Oh my God, now what? I should have been taking recorded notes during this stash. There is a lot going on here. No matter how many times you hear it, there's always something new. It is unbelievable. Oh, no, November 14th, 1995 today for channel member Philip DeAngelis, going back to, for some people, one of the best years of the band, 93 through Clifford Ball. Kind of a can't miss, really. Okay, so maybe that's not true. There were some misses in there. This was not one of them. The first set, however, though, is probably going to get overlooked because the second set was just completely insane. I mean, even things in the second set that were outstanding are going to get overlooked by this stash. Almost said the stash. But after hearing that August 15th, 93 stash recently, that might be the stash. This is a whole different animal, though. But we got to start with Chalk Dust Torture. That's where they started the first set. And, the first set starts with Chalk Dust, ends with Cavern. Some killer hits in there, too. Stuff we don't get a lot of these days. Foam and Esther. Foam, Esther in the same set. Billy Breeze, Divided Sky. That was all one big run right there in the first set. And then also, yeah, you got your 95 Free in there. Trey, Mr. Percussion. In fact, he got back to the percussion on multiple occasions throughout the night. Julius thrown in there. I'm Blue, I'm Lonesome. So overall, just a nice solid first set. Nothing that would go onto the the all-timer list or anything. But not that you were going to be disappointed with that. In fact, if you got a second set that was around that caliber, still would have been a pretty solid show. However, the second set was not at maybe like a B plus caliber. We'll call that first set like a B plus, maybe bordering on an A minus just with songs like Foam and Esther. But, it's hard. Back then, we weren't like, oh, we never get Foam, Esther, so we're calling this a B plus. We'll try and put ourselves back into fall of 95. And then right off the top in the second set, well, hold on, I got to gather here. Because, I could quickly talk about how outstanding the Maze was and then how into himself in the song, but yet it was lacking the Gumbo was, and then all hell breaks loose. Okay, so, and look, you're going to be tempted like me if you bust this show out on the app or wherever you get your live fish. You are going to want to go straight for the stash, but this maze is certainly worth your time. It is maybe not the greatest maze ever, but if you're looking for the best maze, this one would certainly be in the this would be a nominee, I would think. It's like 100% maze, and then Trey's just adding a little extra. There's at one point he's doing this effect. It sounds like a flock of geese flying overhead. That may not encourage you to go listen, but I'm telling you, it sounded amazing in the with what was going on. So then you get this quick Gumbo, Trey up there wearing pajamas, and then Paige looks like kind of a poor person that's going to a wedding or something. It was very contrast there between those two. Fishman, Goggle Fishman, Mike, I don't even know what's going on with Mike ever, really. So now let's get to the stash. Now that we know how everybody looked, what was played in the first set, the maze worthy. So the stash, just the normal part of the stash, the beginning, they go through it. It starts to, and it's just a wild, kind of chaotic, but yet together stash. And it kind of quiets down, gets a little trippy. Trey's over here playing around with the percussion. You hear a little bit of Manteca, I believe, first from Mike, and then Fishman's there, and Trey's still on percussion, and if they had just drifted in and given us a few minutes of Manteca right there, it would have been a good game, right there, to be like, all right, man, that's stash. But no, that was far from it. They get into this Manteca jam, not even really a Manteca jam, more of just a Manteca. And then back to stash. And then there was parts where, every time you thought it had gotten down to about as calm as it could get, there would be a big explosion, and then they would calm back down all the way to one point. It's like Trey's back on percussion. The other three guys aren't doing, it's essentially a Trey drum solo. He's tapping on his percussion, and the other guys are doing absolutely nothing. And the crowd right there with them. I think they just had their minds blown after what had happened through the first whole segment of the stash in Manteca. And then Dog-Faced Boy. I guess Dog-Faced Boy, it was a Dog-Faced Boy, but not the song as you would recognize it. It's kind of coming out of this what was just this trippy explosion into this delicate sort of, I don't even know what to call it. It was peaceful and quiet, but still great sounding. And then Dog-Faced Boy appears, and then they weren't quite done. They had to get back at the stash one more time, and they weren't going to just end on that quiet note either. It had to go big and loud. And then they were like, all right, strange design. But then they didn't take much time off. So I'm not even doing the stash justice there. You know, there was so much going on. There's probably this big, awesome chunk that I left out. And it just went much deeper than most of your sandwiches there. You know, you get something, you know, whatever. In this era, they were doing a lot of that, whether if it was antelope into something, back to antelope. Normally it didn't go this deep and just take up a big bulk of the set. But they weren't quite done. You know, it started with that maze, and then it's going to end with a You Enjoy Myself, goes into a full-blown Immigrant Jam song, kind of post-Tramps, and you get a nice steady YEM up into that point. You kind of figured coming off this madness, they're ready to go. They jump into a YEM. And then the Immigrant Song Jam leads them back into a YEM. And then, well, we get a Wedge Rocky Top encore. You know, I don't know why. I sigh there like I'm bummed out or something, but it was more just like a, whew, what a journey. You know, it's a show that I've heard several times. Like I mentioned, that stash every time. It'll hit you kind of different. And I'm sure I've always liked this maze, but just completely smacked upside the head by the maze this time. So, Philip DeAngelis, thank you for the trip back down memory lane. And we will be, it's been kind of a stash month. That Louisville stash earlier, now this one. I think there was perhaps a mediocre stash in between. All right, guys. Boom. I don't know what there was maybe even I got on the live Phish video, 120-110 I wrote down for the maze. I believe that was the flock of geese flying overhead. All right, guys. Boom. We're out of here.